Columbia 22 Voyage. In August 1965, my family moved from Compton to a new housing tract in East Long Beach called El Dorado Park Estates. In September of that year, I started to attend the 7th grade at Douglas Newcomb School. The school was built in the housing tract, and it was the first K through 8th grade school in the city of Long Beach. In English class, we learned about adjectives, adverbs, verbs, conjunctions, infinitives, split infinitives, etc. In math, it wasn't any better. We had to learn the Pythagorean theorem, find the hypotenuse, and work with square roots, among other things. I thought to myself, I'm screwed. I'll never understand any of this shit. I developed a friendship with 3 other like-minded guys, Marty, Russ, and Mark. Between classes, we would sometimes make fun of what we were supposed to learn in the classrooms by acting like 4 gentlemen scholars smoking imaginary pipes and having an intellectual conversation about English or math. Russ might say, I think that the Pythagorean theorem represents the basic structure of math. I would take the imaginary pipe out of my mouth and say, Russ, I fully agree with you. The 4 of us started to hatch a plan that would get us out of this mess and into a world of fun and adventure, doing things we wanted to do and not what our parents, the school system, and society in general wanted us to do. Marty and I were in the Boy Scouts, but Mark had decided to join the Sea Scouts, and over the next couple of years, he gained a lot of knowledge about sailing boats. We slowly developed a plan to steal a sailboat and sail from Long Beach southward to the Panama Canal. We would go through the canal, up towards the Yucatan Peninsula, then sail through the Caribbean Sea to Jamaica, where we would recline on the beach, smoke Jamaican cigars, and watch the pretty girls in their bikinis walk by. I even wrote to the Jamaican Travel Bureau and got a Jamaican travel brochure in the mail addressed to Douglas Isaacs Esquire. I thought that was pretty cool being called Esquire by that Jamaican agency. There was something that separated Mark and me from Russ and Marty, which was when all 4 of us would make plans to do something, only Mark and I would show up. On several occasions, all 4 of us made plans to stay up at night until 12:30 and then sneak out of our houses, meet up at a specific place, hang out, and smoke cigarettes without any adults around to tell us what to do. On these occasions, I would stay up and then slip out of the house to the assigned meeting place and find Mark there, but Russ and Marty never showed up. The next day in school, both of them would tell us how they forgot about it or got so tired that they just fell asleep, or some other bullshit story. After a while, we didn't count on those guys ever showing up, so it was just us 2 who would meet up somewhere and walk the streets of El Dorado Park Estates at night. It was fun to meet up at night. I liked the nighttime. It was dark, calm, and mysterious, and as a teenager, it gave me a sense of power I didn't have in the daytime. We went to the first kindergarten through 8th grade school in the Long Beach School District. School districts used to have kindergarten through 6th grade elementary school, then 7th through 9th grade junior high school, and then 10th through 12th grade senior high school. Since Douglas Newcomb School was the newest school in the district, it was built in a unique way that they would use for future schools. This meant that after finishing 8th grade, we would have to be bused to the 9th grade at DeMille Junior High School for 1 year. Newcomb School had such a small 7th and 8th grade that everybody knew each other to one degree or another. When we took the bus to 9th grade, we all learned to hate that school. All the 9th graders had been there for 2 years, and here we were going to this school for the first time. We were told ahead of time by students who had gone there before us that some of the kids in the school would spit at us as we got off the bus, and they did. They viewed us as the rich kids from El Dorado Park Estates and didn't like us. We didn't like them either, and we would keep to ourselves in front of the school until the school day started. After elementary school, I never ate in any school cafeteria. At DeMille, we could buy hot dogs and milk and eat outside. They had these big dumpster trash cans for us to put our trash. The school had painted little white feet leading up to these trash cans to show us where to walk and throw away our trash. Apparently, they thought we weren't smart enough to figure out where to throw away our trash, and we needed a visual aid to help us out. Mark and I thought this was stupid, so we decided to do something about it. We bought some white spray paint and planned to stay up at night, slip away from our houses, and walk to the school for a little mischievous fun, and that's exactly what we did. We rendezvoused at the corner of Wardlow Road and Claremore Avenue and started walking the 2 miles to the school with cans of white spray paint and flashlights. When we got there, we sprayed 10-foot long by 4-foot wide white feet leading up to these trash dumpsters. We stayed a little while to admire our work, then walked 2 miles back to our homes. I was amazed that there were no cops the whole time we were out, because if there had been, we would have gotten caught. The next day, we got on the bus, and when we got to the school, we found out that the janitors had somehow cleaned the big feet off the blacktop. Even though we could still see a ghost image of what we had done. My parents had season tickets to the Los Angeles Music Center. Once a month, they would go out on a Saturday night and eat dinner at Lori's The Prime Rib or the Original Pantry Cafe. They would then drive to the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion or the Mark Taper Forum and take in a musical or a play. They wouldn't come back home until after midnight. On one of these Saturday nights, April 27, 1968, when we were in the 9th grade, Mark came over to my parents' house, and we started drinking some of my dad's brandy. We kept on drinking it to the point that my dad would know we had been drinking it. So we thought, what the hell, we'll keep on partying until we polished off a fifth of my dad's brandy. When we finished drinking the entire bottle, Mark said that there was no way he could go home without his parents finding out that he was drunk, and he would be in big trouble. I was going to be in big trouble for us drinking that whole bottle of brandy, so we decided to get whatever money I had and another bottle of brandy and fulfill our 2.5-year-old plan to steal a boat. So we walked from East Long Beach, a couple of blocks east to Los Alamitos High School, and then walked south down Los Alamitos Boulevard to the Long Beach Marina, where we would steal a Columbia 22-foot sailboat. After walking over 12.5 miles, our youthful bodies metabolized the alcohol. We pissed out all of it so that when we arrived at the Long Beach Marina, we were fully sober and ready for an adventure. Mark was in the Sea Scouts, so he knew all about the boat he had picked out to steal. The Columbia 22 was a decent-sized boat that either of us could sail alone at any given time, and it had a keel weighing 1,100 pounds of cast iron, which gave it good stability so it wouldn't tip over easily. Once Mark had picked out the Columbia 22, we boarded it and found out that the 6-horsepower Evinrude motor had no gasoline tank. Mark said that the gas tank must be in a locker by the boats. We went over to the locker that was assigned to that boat. Still, we couldn't get it open to get the gas tank, so we walked back to the boat, and Mark started to push the rudder back and forth. I crawled on my hands and knees to the front of the boat and started to use a paddle that we found on the boat to paddle from the left and right of the front of the boat, guiding it through the Long Beach Marina until we reached the open sea. Then, with Mark's knowledge of the sailboat, we raised the front sail, then the back sail, and started sailing south towards Mexico. As we sailed southward, Mark taught me more about how to skipper the boat. Through Mark's knowledge and my wanting to be taught, I came to know a great deal of sailboating, if for no other reason than for my and Mark's safety. As we were sailing, Mark found an AM/FM radio on board, and he turned it on, and we started to listen to the songs we liked, and gained a feeling of normalcy. Let me tell you now that Los Angeles, California, is a desert community by the sea. The only reason Los Angeles exists is that water has been siphoned off from other areas in and out of this state to make it inhabitable by millions of people. Great mountain ranges surround Los Angeles. The mountain with the most radio and TV antennas on it is Mount Wilson. From the great height and position of Mount Wilson comes rock and roll radio. Mark and I started to listen to KHJ Boss radio station 930 on the AM dial. On this Sunday, KHJ was continuing an all-weekend radio contest called the $1 Million Battle that had started on Friday. The rules were that the records squared off one-on-one. Listeners would call in and vote for their favorite of the two records played. The record that won became the champion and would face a new challenger, and so on. As this contest progressed, songs like the Rolling Stones' Satisfaction were played something like 7 times in a row, beating out all of the songs played in between. I loved it because I loved rock and roll music, and I loved hearing more and more of it during this radio station's battle of the songs. During this contest, Mark and I worked 2-hour shifts crewing the boat. At the end of the contest, I was steering the boat when KHJ announced a tie for first place. 2 songs had been played 16 times in a row. The songs were the Association's Cherish and The Doors' Light My Fire. I loved them both, and I was glad to hear all the songs played on a sunny Sunday afternoon while heading south towards Mexico on a 22-foot sailboat. As we sailed, Mark taught me that when the wind changes, you have to change the position of the mainsail to the other side of the boat to catch the thrust of the wind. This means that the bottom wooden piece of the sail, called the boom, would swing, and if I didn't get out of its way, I could be knocked into the ocean. Sometimes the boat would tilt from the left or right, and Mark taught me to lean my body over the opposite side of the boat to compensate for this. I only weighed 130 pounds at the time, so I don't know how much of an effect my body weight had on this, but I did it anyway. As we looked toward the shore, we started to see what looked like whales swimming by. At first, I didn't believe it, but they were whales that were closer to the shore than we were. I had never seen a whale in the ocean, and it was fascinating that we were further out than they were. I had brought that other bottle of brandy with me, and I said, "Hey Mark, let's break open that bottle and drink some more." Mark told me that the sea rules were no drinking alcohol if you were steering the boat. Since Mark knew about sailing and I didn't, he had taken on the role of captain of the ship, and I had taken on the role of the helmsman, and we were going to obey the rules of sailing, and that was that. On Saturday night, Mark was drinking like a 15-year-old, but on Sunday afternoon, he was acting like an adult with respect for the rules of the sea. The port and starboard sides of the boat that you sit on double as storage compartments. Sometime during this first day, Mark found a screwdriver, and he unscrewed the hinges on these locked compartments and found various things stored in them. A boat has numbers on it, kind of like a license plate to identify it. Mark found some tape that looked similar to the numbers on both sides of the boat. We were afraid the Coast Guard would identify the stolen boat by its numbers, so we decided to change the first number from a 2 to a 1 to try to avoid capture. Mark sailed the boat while I went up front, peeled off the 2 on each side of the boat, and replaced it with the exact size of a number 1 from the roll of tape. Even though we had planned to go on this adventure since the 7th grade, we didn't plan to do it on the spur of the moment. The real reason we were doing it is that we got so drunk we lost our ability to think critically. That, along with the fact that we were only 15 years old, made us say, "What the hell? Let's do it." Mark still had braces on his teeth, and I only had about $3 on me. Even though we didn't talk about it, I think we both knew that we would get caught. We just kept on acting like we were going to go through with the whole thing. When we got near Dana Point, about 42 miles south of where we'd started, the sun was starting to set, and Mark said this would be an excellent place to drop the anchor and get some sleep. He said there was no place to tie up the boat, so we used the anchor instead. I used to think that an anchor kept a boat from drifting by its sheer weight, but after Mark explained it, I realized that an anchor couldn't be that heavy, or it would sink the boat. The anchor on this boat is called a Danforth anchor, and the 2 parts of it are hinged on one side. So Mark threw the anchor overboard and pulled on the rope so that the lower part of the anchor would dig into the ocean floor and act like a stake and keep the boat from moving. It took several times of throwing it over and then pulling on it before Mark was satisfied that the anchor was set for good. The cabin on the boat had 3 places to sleep. The forward stateroom and the main cabin with 2 places on either side, with cushions. Mark took the forward stateroom as the boat captain, and I slept on one of the cushions in the main cabin. Even though I worried about our situation and even though we hadn't slept for over 24 hours, I was surprised that I slept a good 8 hours that Sunday night. On Monday morning, we woke up to an overcast day. It took several attempts, but Mark got the anchor free and pulled it up, and we were ready to continue on our voyage southward. We put the sails up, but there wasn't much wind, so Mark moved the rudder back and forth, and we drifted slowly down the coast. We didn't realize it, but we were drifting towards the Marine Corps base at Camp Pendleton, the major West Coast base of the United States Marine Corps, which is one of the largest Marine Corps bases in the United States. As the fog lifted, blue skies revealed that military exercises were happening on the beach and the sea early on Monday morning. As we drifted further south, we could see tanks driving around the sand near the water to our left, and on our right, there were Navy ships out in the ocean. There was a row of amphibious landing craft. Behind them, it seemed like every naval vessel the Navy had, including battleships. The only exception was that there were no aircraft carriers. It was late April 1968, and the Vietnam War was in high gear, so it made sense that there wouldn't be any aircraft carriers among the many ships because they were crucial to the American air war in Vietnam. It looked like the amphibious landing craft were ready to storm the beach, and the only thing stopping them was Mark and me. A small powerboat started coming our way, and we both thought they would go right up to our boat and see that we were 2 15-year-old boys and turn us over to the authorities. But they didn't. They stopped about 200 feet from us, and one guy got on a bullhorn and told us to get out of the shipping lane. We immediately signaled okay by waving at the boat. Then Mark told me to get the paddle, and Mark started to push the rudder back and forth faster, and I crawled on my hands and knees to the front of the boat and started to use the paddle one more time. Slowly, we got out of their way, and when we looked back, We saw all those amphibious landing craft storming the beach with the front doors opening up and soldiers running out of the vessels. I don't know about Mark, but I thought it was pretty cool that 2 teenagers stopped the military exercises at Camp Pendleton on a Monday morning during the Vietnam War, if only for 10 or 15 minutes. The wind started to pick up soon after that event, and we resumed our sailing south toward the city of Oceanside. We arrived in the early afternoon, sailed into the Oceanside harbor, and looked for an inconspicuous place to tie up the boat. Mark found a place at the end of a dock, and we tied up there. The seats on the deck of the boat were also used as storage compartments. When we got sailing, and I learned how to sail enough so that Mark didn't have to watch me, he started looking at what was on the boat. The storage compartments were locked, so he took a screwdriver and unscrewed the hinges of the outside seats, and one of the things he found was an inflatable raft. We walked into town and did a little sightseeing. We saw a pawn shop on one of the streets. Mark and I thought that we could go back and get the inflatable raft and pawn it. So that's what we set out to do. We got the raft and brought it back into the pawn shop, and asked the pawn shop owner how much he'd give us for it. He said he could give us $20 for it. Then he said, "How old are you guys?" We said that we were 15 years old, and he said he couldn't do business with us because we were minors. So we were about to leave the shop when the owner said, "Wait a minute, I've got an idea." He saw a Marine near us and asked him if he could do us a favor. He said, "Sure, what is it?" The pawn shop owner asked him if he would buy the raft from us, then sell it to him, and then he would give the $20 to the Marine, and he would give the money to us. So that's how the transaction went down, and we walked out of there with a $20 bill. We walked around Oceanside for quite a while, and then we bought a local newspaper and looked through it, and found a restaurant where we could get something to eat and see a movie. We ate at the restaurant where we both had a cheeseburger, French fries, and a Coke. After eating, we went to see a movie. I don't remember the name or much about the movie, except that it was action-packed. I don't think it was a major motion picture, just a B-movie. After the movie, we walked back to the Oceanside harbor and found out that all the gates were locked, including the gate that would lead us to the Columbia 22. Mark scaled the high fence and told me to do the same. I've had a fear of heights since I can remember, and I could see that this gate was going to give me trouble. I told Mark I'd think about it. He started to walk towards the end of the dock, and the boat to go to sleep. Just as he did, a man wearing regular clothes walked up to me and showed me his police badge. He called for Mark to come back, and I think Mark scaled the gate again. Then another plainclothes police officer showed up. The new man took Mark and walked him about 20 feet away. The first policeman asked me where I was from, and I told him, San Diego. The two men talked with each other, then the policeman who spoke to me returned and said, "Your friend says you guys are from Long Beach." Then he said I was under arrest, and Mark and I were escorted to the back of one of the unmarked police cars and driven to the Oceanside City Jail. It seems that the harbormaster spotted our boat during the day because it wasn't docked in a regular place. It was just tied up at the end of the dock. I believe they had found out that our boat was the boat from the Long Beach harbor that was reported stolen. Then we were taken to the Oceanside jail, where our mug shots and fingerprints were taken. We told them the names, addresses, and phone numbers of our parents, and then they put us in a jail cell. We were in big trouble, but at least the journey was over. After all, what were we going to do if they had not caught us and we had slept on the boat and then sailed toward San Diego and further south without money, food, or anything else? After talking about the shit we were in for when we got back home, we both went to sleep. The next day, we woke up and waited for the police. After a few hours, a policeman opened our door, and an inmate trustee put our breakfast on a table in our cell. Our breakfast was a Swanson frozen breakfast. I remember thinking that Swanson had made frozen TV dinners for years. Still, I didn't remember them advertising frozen breakfast. So we ate our food and then waited for hours to see what would come next. I'm sure we said things to each other, but I don't remember what we said. Finally, the police took us out of our jail cell and walked us to a place where two plainclothed policemen from the Long Beach Police Department were waiting for us. The Long Beach policemen walked us to the parking lot and put us in the back seat of their unmarked car. We started to make the long trip back to Long Beach. I don't remember what the police said to us, but I don't think it was too much. It was a 75-mile ride from Oceanside to the Long Beach City Jail at 415 West Ocean Boulevard. The police let us out of the car and escorted us into the jail. They told us that the juvenile section of the jail was full, and they put us in the adult section in a cell close to the front desk. Mark and I talked about how upset our parents were going to be once they picked us up, and we waited for the inevitable to happen. The police put 2 young men in the jail cell next to us. They had gone AWOL from the military and were arrested, and were waiting to be turned over to the military. They asked us what we were there for, and we told them, and we all commiserated about being in jail. Finally, a policeman opened up our jail cell and told Mark to come out and go with him. He was going to meet his parents, who were there to pick him up. I just waited for my turn to be confronted by my angry parents. While I was waiting, the police had brought in a young man who was loaded on reds, which is a slang name for the barbiturate seconal. He had taken quite a few of them and could barely walk or talk. It seemed like this wasn't the first time he had been in jail, and that the police knew him. They asked him his name and date of birth, and it took him a while to answer them using slurred speech. The police seemed to have fun talking with him and joking about how loaded he was. They told him to put on his shoes and tie them. This was a daunting task for him, and he had to make several attempts to do it. Then a policeman came, opened up my jail cell, and told me to follow him. He led me into a room where a police sergeant and my parents were waiting for me. The police sergeant talked to me about what Mark and I had done. He said that we were lucky to get caught when we did. He told me that if we had made it past San Diego and into Mexican waters, at some point, some poor Mexicans would have seen us 2 white 15-year-old boys and would have boarded our boat, cut our throats, and thrown us into the ocean. Then they'd have themselves an expensive boat which they could sell. He told me that when we sold the rubber raft in Oceanside for $20, the little trick the store owner did to buy the raft from the Marine, and then the Marine gave us the money, was illegal. It was called a conspiracy, and conspiracy was against the law. He told me a few other things, then he released me to my parents. My parents and I walked to their car, and we all got in the front seat with me in the middle. I guess they didn't want me to open up the door at a red light and run out. My mother was incredibly pissed at me and let me know about it all the way home. I knew that she wasn't just mad at what I had done, but how she would look as a parent when everybody in the neighborhood found out. When we got home, I don't remember what we talked about or what kind of punishment I was given. All I knew was that on Wednesday, the next day, I was going back to school. In the morning, I got on the bus to go to school. When I got off the bus, Marty and Russ wanted to know all about what had happened. I was embarrassed to be there. I thought all the kids knew what we had done and were looking at us. After a while, I figured out that not all of them knew what we had done. One kid, a tough guy named Pat Hayes, came up to me and told me that the school officials had asked him where he thought that we went, and that he told them we were headed to Canada to throw them off base. I thought that was cool. Usually, Pat Hayes didn't talk to a skinny kid like me. The fact that he was talking to me and lied to the school officials meant that he thought a little higher of me than he had before. I went through the school day with not too many people saying anything. But when I got to English class, the teacher, Mrs. Mortensen, asked, "So how was your little trip, Doug?" I said it was just fine, and she said that's good. It was just the kind of smartass remark that Mortensen would say. When I got home that day, I told my mother what Mrs. Mortensen said, and my mother said, "Damn it, that school told us that none of the teachers were going to say anything." My parents told me that when they talked to the school officials, they said that I had never participated in any of the after-school activities and that this might have contributed to my antisocial behavior. I didn't know one kid from Douglas Newcomb School who participated in anything that they didn't have to. We all hated that school. The following school year, in September 1968, the 8th grade class of Newcomb was bused to John Marshall Junior High School because it was a better school. The parents complained about the treatment we students initially received and how generally bad DeMille Junior High was. My dad talked to the man whose boat we stole. He lived in Rossmoor, just a few miles south of where Mark and I lived. My dad told him that he and Mark's dad would pay him back for any damage we did to his boat, plus the time it took to retrieve it from Oceanside. My dad told me that the man wasn't mad at us, he was just glad to get his boat back. He said that he had also pulled a prank like Mark and I had when he was a teenager, and he could understand why we did it. I was glad to hear that and didn't feel so bad for stealing his boat after hearing it. Mark and I never went to court, and for some reason, we never saw a judge. We were put on 3 months probation. We had to show up at 415 West Ocean Boulevard, which was the court and probation building. Our parents, along with several other kids, walked into the room and sat around a table. There was a woman probation officer there, and she went down the list of us juveniles and what we had done. When she got to Mark and me, she said she didn't want us talking to each other again. She said that when we got together, trouble happened. Then I heard her tell other young people the same thing. We had to come back there once a month for 2 more visits. In the second month, my dad drove me down to the probation department, and we found out that this woman wasn't in, and my father had to fill out a card, and then they let us go. After I finished 8th grade, I went to Idlewild Music Camp for 2 weeks in the early summer. I had been playing the cello since the 4th grade, and I had a great time in music camp. My parents thought it would be a good idea to let me go to Idlewild this coming summer. They felt that if they didn't let me go, as punishment for stealing the boat, I would rebel and cause more trouble. That meant that I couldn't show up for the 3rd meeting with the probation officer. My parents called her up and explained the situation, and she said okay, he doesn't have to show up for the final probation meeting, and that was it. Mark and I never spoke to each other again. We both went to Millikan High School and graduated in June of 1971. I never found out what happened to him later in life, and how he felt about our Columbia 22 boating experience. Decades later, I found Mark on Facebook and became friends with him. I messaged this story to Mark, and he wrote back and said, "Sounds like what happened. You remember a lot of details." In 1971, my parents were getting a divorce. They sold the house after I graduated from Millikan. I got a suitcase. They went their way, and I went mine. I had to pay my own way. I was 26 when I graduated from college. That was a long time ago, and much has happened since then. I do not remember any other details, and I am doing well now. It's really too bad about Mark. I always wondered what he thought about the whole thing. When I saw him on Facebook and became friends with him, I was writing the story, and I thought now I can get his side of the story. I hoped that he would remember a few things that I had forgotten about. But sadly, he doesn't want to talk about it. There is nothing to feel ashamed about since we were only 15 years old at the time, and it was 54 years ago. I've always thought it was a good story. Who knows why he wants to keep it lost in the past.